So this was Meghan's very first outing with the Queen. It happened right after her wedding to Prince Harry, and it was obviously extremely important and a significant occasion because it was her first outing.
The 19th of May 2018 is forever etched in global memory as a romantic fairy tale day. A sun-drenched afternoon at Windsor Castle, where a modern American actress joined the world's oldest royal family. To the public, it was the wedding of the century. Through a meticulous compilation of insider reports and investigative journalism by figures like Tom Bower, along with the chilling silence of Hollywood elites, we are slowly uncovering the deep cracks beneath that glamorous facade. Oprah Winfrey, the undisputed queen of exclusive interviews renowned for her rare ability to read people like an open book, now quietly admits she made the absolute biggest mistake of her television career. After that bombshell interview, Oprah went completely silent regarding Meghan Markle. She avoided making comments on the red carpet, skipped mentioning her in press interviews, and stayed tight-lipped even during casual private conversations. Attending that royal wedding marked the quiet beginning of Oprah's career decline. It was never just a wedding. It was a highly calculated media recruitment campaign that rocked the British monarchy, ultimately triggering the strategic downfall of a global media mogul. Long before the first carriage ever set off, a silent war of attrition was already raging over the official guest list. Highly placed palace sources now reveal that Queen Elizabeth II was deeply unsettled by the names or lack thereof presented by Meghan and Harry. Under traditional royal protocol, a wedding is supposed to be a communal celebration of history and shared loyalty. For the wedding of Prince William and Catherine Middleton back in 2011, the chapel pews were filled with the actual backbone of Britain. We saw postmen from Bucklebury local shopkeepers and old childhood friends who had known Kate since she was just a toddler. It felt like a true celebration of genuine connection. In stark contrast, Meghan Markle's proposed guest list was bluntly described by one royal courtier as a red carpet casting call. Insider reports suggest that the Queen returned the draft list several times, questioning the complete absence of the bride's own family. Aside from her mother, Doria Ragland, Meghan's blood relatives were conspicuously missing, replaced instead by a massive who's who of American power players. The late Queen, known for her sharp intuition, reportedly made a pointed remark on the deeply calculated nature of those invitations. When the names of George and Amal Clooney, Oprah Winfrey and Idris Elba appeared on the list, the eyebrows of the palace old guard did not just rise, they stayed up there. Why exactly were these famous individuals who had zero documented history, with the couple being handed prime seats of honour inside the choir of St. George's Chapel, those spots usually reserved strictly for the closest inner circle? The truth, as bared by investigative author Tom Bower and supported by shocking revelations in Airmail, is that these Hollywood celebrities were not actual friends, they were strategic assets. Meghan was reportedly building a powerful media shield, an elite phalanx of Hollywood's most influential voices, to fiercely protect her narrative once she eventually transitioned back to the United States. The most damning evidence of this plan comes from a private exchange at the royal wedding itself. Carolyn Bartholomew, a close former roommate of Princess Diana and an invited guest at the wedding, reportedly turned directly to George and Amal Clooney as they sat inside the historic chapel. When she casually asked how they actually knew the bride or groom, the famous Hollywood power couple did not offer up some charming anecdote about a shared dinner in London. Instead, they responded with a blunt, jarring piece of honesty: "We don't." Despite this confession, the Clooneys were treated like elite VIPs. The exact same applied to Idris Elba and, most significantly, Oprah Winfrey. To the monarchy, this felt like an outright invasion, a deeply cynical commodification of a sacred state occasion. While Catherine's royal wedding felt like a warm, genuine embrace of the British public, Meghan's wedding felt like a cold, highly strategic manoeuvre. For years, Oprah Winfrey remained the most vocal cheerleader of this new era. Inside her publication, Oh, the Oprah magazine, she described walking into Windsor Castle as a completely breathless experience. She even famously shouted, "Whoa!" when she saw the sheer scale of the history. Back then, she eagerly framed it as a massive victory for love and a true cultural reset. She even shared a light-hearted story regarding a sudden fashion emergency, having to completely change her dress at the last minute because her original choice looked far too close to white, presenting it as a gesture of profound respect for the bride. However, close sources to the Harpo production team now suggest that even during the festivities, Oprah was quietly observing far more than she was publicly sharing. Behind all her public praise for Meghan's radiant look, Oprah was reportedly taking silent notes on the absolute grandeur of the royal family, a high standard of prestige she would later realize Meghan could never truly replicate. Oprah's fascination with the royal family was always rooted in a deep respect for the institution, an institution she had seen beautifully represented during the wedding of William and Catherine. She greatly admired the profound sacredness of the Middleton wedding, the hand-woven carpets, the meticulous floral arrangements featuring Lily of the Valley, and the reassuring presence of ordinary people who formed the daily fabric of Catherine's life. The sharp contrast with Meghan's wedding, which palace insiders described as half-baked and highly performative, planted a seed of doubt that would take years to fully sprout. While the public cameras captured a seemingly serene bride, the staff at Windsor Castle were dealing with what they privately termed Duchess difficult. The shocking revelations regarding those pre-wedding preparations are truly staggering. In a shocking move that stunned the palace, Meghan reportedly demanded that the 500-year-old St. George's Chapel be sprayed with atomizers to clear out the musty smell. Naturally, the palace refused point-blank, citing the preservation of precious historic artifacts and the inherent disrespect of treating a royal chapel like some cheap commercial studio. During a menu tasting, Meghan allegedly berated a royal staff member because she stubbornly insisted she could taste egg in a purely vegan dish. It was at that exact moment that the Queen herself reportedly stepped in, telling her in no uncertain terms, "Meghan, in this family, we do not speak to people like that." These were clearly not just standard wedding jitters. To the royal family, these were clear signs of a personality that sought to dominate rather than integrate. They saw a demanding bride who was far more interested in the aesthetic of the crown than the actual duty it required. The single most significant development in this ongoing saga is the recent quiet distancing by Oprah Winfrey. For decades, Oprah's global brand was built entirely on the truth. When sitting down with Meghan in 2021, she believed she was helping a misunderstood underdog tell her story. But as major inconsistencies began to surface, specifically that bizarre claim about a secret wedding 3 days prior, which the Archbishop of Canterbury actually had to publicly deny, Oprah slowly realised she had been led by the nose. The media shield Meghan so carefully recruited in 2018 is now completely dissolving. George Clooney, once the guest who did not even know the bride, has recently been spotted in deep, warm conversation with King Charles III at Prince's Trust events. The message is clear. Hollywood elite always prefer the real deal over some highly calculated imitation. Rumours that an Oscar-winning actress begged to swap seats just to avoid Meghan at a high society gala speak volumes about the cold indifference now facing the Sussexes. While the rest of the world watched the sun glisten off the ancient stone walls of Windsor, a quiet psychological war was playing out behind the heavy velvet drapes of the private palace apartments. This second chapter of our closer investigation shines a light on the demanding, highly aggressive ultimatums pushed by Meghan Markle as she prepared for the grand 2018 wedding ceremony. Demanding behaviour that did not just rattle the seasoned palace staff but actually drove a permanent wedge straight through the heart of the British royal family. Drawing from a goldmine of insider accounts and detailed reporting from top royal biographers, we reveal how the famous phrase, "what Meghan wants," Meghan gets established a toxic precedent that eventually came back to haunt her Hollywood dreams. One of the single most dramatic moments of tension, now widely known throughout palace circles as the infamous Tiara Gate, was the earliest warning sign that Meghan treated the priceless royal collection not as a sacred historical trust, but rather as her own high-end dressing room. Insiders close to the late Queen Elizabeth II confirmed that picking out the wedding day headpiece was incredibly tense. Reports say Meghan was absolutely obsessed with wearing a gorgeous tiara, heavily accented with rare, massive emeralds. But the Queen, who was the final gatekeeper of all the crown jewels, firmly blocked that request because of a deep concern over its historical origins. There were serious worries that those particular emeralds came from a Russian collection with a highly questionable past, making them a major diplomatic risk for such a massive global event. Once Meghan received that firm rejection, Prince Harry's personal reaction was absolutely explosive. Right in the middle of that fiery argument, Harry snapped with his now infamous quote, "What Meghan wants, Meghan gets." This was much more than just a protective groom standing up for his bride. For Her Majesty, this was an open insult to her royal authority and the long-standing rules of the palace. The Queen's ultimate response was a masterclass in quiet, steely resolve. She supposedly pulled Harry to one side and gave him a stern reality check. Meghan cannot just have whatever she pleases. She will wear the tiara that I choose for her. Eventually the Queen offered the Queen Mary diamond bandeau, but the real damage was already done. The clash painted a picture of a bride far less interested in the grace of royal duty, focusing instead on projecting raw power. It was a calculating streak that Oprah Winfrey and other top-tier Hollywood stars would only recognise years down the road as a permanent behavioural pattern. Honestly, absolutely no moment during those tense wedding preparations has sparked more fierce debate than the legendary showdown between Meghan Markle and Catherine, who was the Duchess of Cambridge at the time. For several years, the entire narrative was completely buried under a classic he said, she said mystery before the true details finally emerged. That massive fight actually focused on an incredibly trivial issue, the fits of the flower girl dresses for little Princess Charlotte and the rest of the bridesmaids. Palace etiquette for a massive Windsor wedding insists that these young bridesmaids must wear formal tights. Tights! It was a time-honoured tradition designed for royal formality and the physical comfort of young kids sitting through a long, highly televised broadcast. Yet Meghan dug her heels in for a modern Hollywood-style look that meant the girls had to go bare-legged. To the family, this was not just a simple style choice, but a direct violation of the historical etiquette Catherine was desperately trying to maintain. Reports from palace insiders reveal that during an incredibly stressful fitting session, Charlotte's dress was a total mess, and going without tights actually caused the poor children to develop painful blisters. The argument escalated so much that Catherine was left crying. Though Meghan went on to claim during her big 2021 tell-all interview that the exact opposite happened, trusted palace sources and eyewitnesses at the fitting have continuously insisted that Catherine was the one left deeply distressed by Meghan's incredibly cold and abrasive tone. For the royal family, this went far beyond some wedding dress. It was about Meghan's total refusal to respect the experience and boundaries of Catherine, who had successfully handled that complex royal spotlight for a whole decade. This single ugly incident marked the permanent end of their Fab Four alliance, especially since Prince William reportedly viewed that awful treatment of his wife as an unforgivable breach of family trust. To make matters worse, palace friction was heightened by the massive contrast in how both of the recent royal weddings were actually organised. When Catherine Middleton married William back in 2011, the whole process was hailed as a collaborative national effort. Catherine dedicated months to building genuine connections with the household staff, learning everything from the history of the table linens to the flowers and royal protocols. She truly respected her role in a grand, historic legacy. Meghan's style, according to several palace staff members, who have since broken their silence, was like an aggressive Hollywood producer managing a movie set. There were endless stories of Meghan obsessing over specific camera angles and studio lighting, regularly treating high-ranking royal ladies-in-waiting as if they were low-level production assistants on a Hollywood movie set. This exhausting showbiz attitude deeply grated on the nerves of palace staff who viewed the entire monarchy as a quiet, service-oriented institution. Oprah Winfrey, who would eventually speak with breathless wonder about that beautiful wedding, was apparently completely blind to all of this toxic internal drama unfolding behind closed doors. Oprah focused purely on the sparkling romance and modern look, totally missing the quiet tears of the future queen or the utter frustration of royal chefs being scolded over tiny details like vegan ingredients. Those red flags that Oprah eventually noticed during their 2021 chat. Like the bizarre claim they were secretly married by the Archbishop in their private backyard days, before the actual ceremony began to cast a dark shadow over the entire 2018 event. If Meghan was willing to mislead people about the sacred legalities of her marriage ceremony, what other parts of that fairy tale wedding day were just a highly choreographed show. As the date drew closer, the guest list became a war zone. Leaving out all of Meghan's close childhood friends and her own extended family, the very people who actually knew the real, authentic Meghan, sent a chilling warning sign through the quiet halls of the palace. By packing the church pews with random Hollywood stars like Oprah, the Clooneys, and Idris Elba, she was basically wiping away her own past to draft an entirely new, star-studded future. It was a brilliant public relations move for the moment. By locking down the ultimate queen of daytime television, Meghan made sure her personal story would be warmly defended in the American media market. Oprah's charming anecdote about quickly changing her dress to respect the bride was precisely the kind of loyal, glowing coverage Meghan desperately craved. But as we clearly see today, that fierce loyalty was built on a fragile foundation of perceived authenticity. The exact second that performance cracked and the minute Oprah realized she was being used as a convenient ladder rather than a close confidant, that protective Hollywood shield completely fell apart. The infamous Tiara-gate drama and that Kate Middleton meltdown were way more than just typical pre-wedding jitters. In reality, they were the first major moves in a campaign to put personal branding above royal tradition. When the historic bells of St. George's Chapel echoed on that hot May morning, the entire world witnessed a picture-perfect story of absolute diversity and a brand new era for the British royal family. But for the elite guests seated inside the choir, the most exclusive part of the cathedral, the vibe was thick with a strange sort of confusion. Part 3 of our deep dive unpacks the surreal reality facing those wedding guests. A crowd of Hollywood's most powerful A-list stars who, by their own later admissions, or from what onlookers saw, felt much more like mere props for a massive movie production than real friends of Meghan Markle. This clever star-studded casting strategy hit its absolute peak during the actual ceremony. Detailed reports from big outlets like Vanity Fair and biographer Andrew Morton highlighted the highly tactical nature of the seating chart. Oprah Winfrey, easily the single most powerful woman in American media, was placed in a prime, highly visible spot for the cameras. But as we later learned from the bizarre contradictions that would follow, Oprah's attendance was actually the result of a very fresh and highly calculated charm offensive by Meghan. Only weeks before the big day, Meghan invited Oprah to hang out with her mother, Doria Ragland, in Los Angeles. A clever move meant to manufacture an instant deep family bond that simply did not exist before. Having George and Amal Clooney sit near the front remains one of the most famous examples of this fake intimacy. When the high-profile couple took their seats, the nearby guests, including minor royals and old friends of Princess Diana's Spencer family, instantly noticed that the Clooneys looked totally out of place. So when Diana's old friend Carolyn Bartholomew asked them how they got invited, their honest answer that they did not even know the bride or groom was a quiet bombshell that shocked everyone nearby. They had absolutely zero shared history. They were there because Meghan knew that in the game of global branding, proximity to fame is real power. By surrounding herself with huge names like the Clooneys and Oprah, she sent a clear signal that she belonged to a different kind of royalty, the Hollywood elite. The contrast between this star-studded chapel and the wedding of William and Kate was absolutely massive. Kate's wedding was a beautiful celebration of real community. Oprah herself would later write about how breathtaking the scale of Windsor was, completely missing the quiet disapproval felt by royal traditionalists. While Prince William's wedding was a historic state occasion that felt truly earned, Meghan's wedding was increasingly seen as a slick commercial launch that just happened to take place inside a cathedral. That wow moment Oprah described the feeling that the world was shifting was the exact emotional reaction Meghan's PR script wanted to trigger. But behind closed doors, major contradictions were already showing up. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who officiated, ended up right at the centre of a massive scandal when Meghan later claimed to Oprah in 2021 that they had actually married in secret 3 days before the public event. The Archbishop's polite correction that the legal wedding was definitely the public one made that 2018 ceremony look like a giant performance that even Meghan herself did not really respect. As those celebrity strangers left the historic chapel and made their way to the reception, the very first cracks in their polished media armour were already showing. Sure, they had played their assigned parts in this grand fairy tale romance. But they were starting to realise that this golden invitation came with major strings attached. These celebrities weren't just wedding guests, they were being recruited to help anchor a massive PR narrative that was about to shift from Windsor to Montecito. The trade-off, as a top stylist later put it, was pretty simple. Oprah lent her massive credibility and Meghan supplied the sensational story. But back in 2018, the reigning queens of Hollywood had no idea they were being led straight into a bitter royal feud they never wanted. Once the actual vows were done and everyone headed over to St. George's Hall for the afternoon reception, the flawless media image Meghan had built up so carefully started showing its first real warning signs. While the public watched a gorgeous sun-drenched carriage parade, multiple royal insiders described the mood inside as professionally polite but deeply cold on a personal level. Part 4 of our investigation looks closely at the subtle but deep awkwardness felt by these major Hollywood stars as they realised they were changing from wedding guests into social pawns for Meghan's master plan. The afternoon party hosted by Queen Elizabeth was supposed to be a traditional royal affair, but having so many Hollywood strangers there created an incredibly awkward social divide. Meanwhile, Oprah Winfrey, who was just gushing over the historic castle's incredible royal magic, suddenly found herself surrounded by the real British establishment old money figures who had spent their entire lives serving the crown. Multiple reports from that weekend later, detailed by famous royal biographers like Tom Bower, reveal that while Oprah was treated with total respect because of her massive fame, there was a heavy, unspoken tension in the room. That beautiful wow moment she felt in the chapel was fast colliding with the reality of a wedding guest list that was completely empty of real family history. Even worse, palace staff noticed a highly awkward disconnect in how the bride was acting. Meghan, whom onlookers described as being in complete director mode, seemed way less focused on the sacred marriage itself and much more on hitting the perfect PR beats for the cameras. While Kate Middleton's 2011 reception was famous for its warmth and including everyday people like her local postman and pub owner, Meghan's party felt more like a cutthroat Hollywood networking event. These famous strangers, including George and Amal Clooney alongside Idris Elba, were suddenly treated like the new royal inner circle. This shocking move deeply offended Prince Harry's lifelong friends and the Spencer family. And the unspoken deal being made here, where Oprah lent her massive credibility in exchange for a historic exclusive story, was starting to look incredibly obvious to everyone paying close attention. Oprah's fun, self-deprecating story about her last-minute wardrobe change was the perfect example of the supportive, loyal ally role she had been assigned to play. But behind closed doors, the glaring contradictions were quickly piling up, shutting out Meghan's father, Thomas Markle, and completely erasing her family's past, as her brother, Thomas Markle Jr., later revealed in angry tell-all interviews, created a massive void of real authenticity that no amount of flashy Hollywood star power could ever hope to fix. By the time the exclusive evening party at Frogmore House kicked off a much more intimate event, hosted by Prince Charles, the highly calculated fake nature of the guest list was all anyone was quietly gossiping about. The Hollywood stars were starting to realise they weren't just attending a royal wedding, they were actually being onboarded into a brand. As we enter the final act of this royal saga, we see how this calculated recruitment plan would completely backfire. The very power players Meghan sought to use as her personal shield, including Oprah, the Clooneys, and the Hollywood elite, would be the first to back away when the performance lost its luster. This left the Duchess to face a cold Hollywood indifference that is far more damaging than any rigid palace protocol. The year 2021 was supposed to be when her media shield solidified. That big sit-down interview between Oprah Winfrey and the Sussexes was heavily marketed as a historic act of truth-telling, a massive cultural reset that would justify the highly strategic recruitment of Hollywood's elite back in 2018. However, in the years following that controversial broadcast, the public narrative shifted from one of female empowerment to deep professional regret. The turning point for Oprah Winfrey was not one single event, but a slow, steady accumulation of highly questionable untruths. The most damaging inconsistency of all was that claim regarding their secret backyard wedding. So when the Archbishop of Canterbury was forced to publicly clarify that the only legal wedding was indeed that grand ceremony at Windsor, it did not just damage Meghan's credibility, it tarnished Oprah's reputation as a highly rigorous journalist. Oprah, who prides herself on her strong intuition and ability to read, people reportedly felt used. She had handed over her massive global platform, a brand built on decades of raw authenticity, to a story that was, in parts, a mere performance. This realization quickly cracked their once solid Hollywood alliance. The exact same celebrities who were recruited as VIP strangers back in 2018 began to make a strategic retreat. The most visible shift of all came from the Clooneys. George and Amal Clooney, who had once offered up their private Lake Como villa as a quiet sanctuary for the Sussexes, began to prioritise their long-standing respect for the British monarchy over their manufactured friendship with Meghan. George Clooney's recent appearances alongside King Charles III at Prince's Trust events serve as a loud, silent signal to the entire entertainment industry. These A-list strangers are quietly returning to the warm fold of traditional royal prestige. The cold indifference from Hollywood has been surgical in its precision. It is no longer about active vocal criticism. It is about the unanswered email and the missing VIP invitation. The rumours of Oscar winner Viola Davis requesting a quick seat change to avoid sitting near Meghan are not just empty gossip. They reflect a growing desire among Hollywood's real royalty to distance themselves from a brand perceived as calculated and highly mercenary. Even Oprah's closest friend Gayle King, who was once known as the loudest public defender of the Sussexes, reportedly felt the strain when it was discovered that Meghan was pitching identical documentary concepts to multiple industry power players simultaneously. The realization that they were being treated as stepping stones rather than trusted confidants was the absolute final blow. Furthermore, these major inconsistencies extended deep into the domestic sphere, casting a dark shadow over the relatable, humble image Meghan tried to project. That scene with Archie's chickens in the interview, which was meant to evoke a sense of down-to-earth simplicity, was later rumoured among Harpo production insiders to have been just as staged as that wedding guest list. For an industry icon like Oprah, whose legendary career is deeply rooted in the absolute power of truth, discovering she had enabled a calculated PR project instead of a raw conversation has led to a period of profound disillusionment. The heavy silence now coming from Montecito is matched only by the equally cold silence from Oprah's camp. That grand moment of 2018 has been replaced by a very quiet, firm distance. Hollywood is a town built on trading credibility for access, and when that credibility is compromised by constant inconsistencies, your access is quickly revoked. Meghan Markle, who once used her own royal wedding as a grand casting call for her future life, now finds that the exact same stars she recruited are the very ones leading the exodus, leaving her to deal with an elite Hollywood community that is increasingly done with her performance. As we reach the final conclusion of this detailed investigation, the social world surrounding Meghan Markle and Prince Harry has transformed from a star-studded sanctuary into a vast desert of cold indifference. The grand PR design that began with the highly strategic recruitment of A-list strangers at the 2018 Windsor wedding has finally reached its inevitable end game. Their protective media shield has not only cracked, it has completely dissolved, leaving behind a profound, sharp lesson about the difference between calculated social influence and authentic royal prestige. The quiet final chapter of this saga is not written in loud, screaming headlines, but rather in the quiet, decisive retreat of the world's most powerful media figures, led by the silent telling pivot of Oprah Winfrey herself. The most damning revelation of this current era is the dramatic shift in how Hollywood's tight inner circle now views the Sussexes and their performance. For years, the entertainment industry was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, captivated by that emotional woe moment Oprah initially championed. But as the inconsistencies moved from the ancient palace walls straight to the editing suites of Montecito, the mood quickly shifted from curiosity to extreme caution. The revelation that Meghan reportedly treated her 2021 interview as a completely calculated move, with industry insiders claiming she laughed about how incredibly easy it was to influence the public mood by simply looking sad, has struck at the very heart of Hollywood's social contract. In a ruthless town where everyone is constantly performing, the one unforgivable sin is getting caught in the act of manipulating your own powerful allies. The massive Hollywood exodus is now a well-documented reality. The A-list strangers who once filled the grand pews of St. George's Chapel are nowhere to be found today when the Sussexes need them the most. The social distancing of George and Amal Clooney was the first major domino to fall, but it was the quiet Viola Davis snub that sent the clearest message of all. When figures of such high integrity and elite professional standing start requesting different seating, it signals that the brand has indeed become truly toxic. It is no longer a matter of royal family politics, but a matter of professional survival. In the Hollywood machine, power follows trust, and that trust has been completely broken. Oprah Winfrey's quiet, steady withdrawal is perhaps the most significant revelation of all. While she has made no dramatic public statement, her quiet actions speak with the heavy weight of a final judgment. The realization that she was led by the nose into validating a clever PR project instead of a truthful, raw narrative has now led to a total cessation of her public support. This alleged no more Meghan, no more Harry rule, sent straight to her inner circle, marks a massive shift. Oprah, who built a multi-billion-dollar media empire on her reputation for exposing the absolute truth, simply cannot afford to be linked to tall tales that have been debunked by everyone from the Archbishop of Canterbury to former palace staff. What is worse, comparing the extreme isolation of the Sussexes to the deep, lasting respect shown to William and Catherine, has become a source of quiet humiliation. Now Hollywood elites are looking back at the 2011 wedding of the future king and queen with a deep, newfound sense of appreciation. They now see the transparency and deep dedication to duty they once mistook for rigidity. They admire the sacredness of Catherine's approach and her genuine connection to her community, and her respect for the royal institution stands in stark contrast to Meghan's half-baked attempt to transform the historic monarchy into a flashy personal brand. The painful ultimate revelation is simply this: you cannot build a lasting empire on strategic strangers. Meghan Markle's calculating attempt to use the royal family as a mere stepping stone while treating Hollywood's elite as a shield has left her completely cut off from both worlds. The deafening silence that now greets her every outreach is the sound of an industry that has clearly moved on. Like one top executive put it, trust once broken never gets airtime. The sparkly fairy tale that began with a breathless royal ceremony at Windsor has now ended in a quiet Montecito garden where the cameras have stopped rolling. Those A-list strangers have returned to their actual friends, and the undisputed queen of media has closed the book for good. Their victory of love is completely eclipsed by the cold reality of reputation. And in the final edit, the entire performance simply didn't age well.